Hello. In this video, I'm going to show you how to fully set up WebinarJam so you can start running live webinars for your business. If you don't know who I am, my name is Austin. I build highly optimized systems for businesses to improve their profits and increase their sales. And one of the most common ways I do that is through webinars. So let's get into it. I'm going to show you how to fully set up WebinarJam. It's actually pretty simple, but I'm going to go through all the settings for you so you know that what I use and so you can mimic it. All right, so when you open WebinarJam, you're going to be presented with this screen. It shows WebinarJam on the left, Everwebinar on the right. The settings are almost exactly identical, but the difference is WebinarJam is for a live webinar where you have people register on a specific date, and then they show up, and then you present live. Everwebinar, pretty self-explanatory. You're going to have something pre-recorded. I don't use Everwebinar very often because pre-recorded webinars are less authentic. People know that it's pre-recorded. There are some use cases for it, but for now, we're just going to deal with WebinarJam. So go ahead and click Access, and you're going to be presented with this screen. It shows a list of previous webinars. And so we're just going to hit Add Webinar in the top right. Now you got two options here, the Express and the full configuration. Once you understand how to do the full configuration, the Express is going to be pretty self-explanatory. So I'm going to show you how to do the full configuration. It takes a little bit longer, but it has more options. So hit full configuration, then click Next. And then you're going to have three options here. I almost always use schedule for later. I pick a date in the future. I schedule the webinar for later. You have these two other options if you want to. These are pretty niche. I don't know anybody that uses them, but they're useful. If you want to go live right now, you could choose that option. And then there's an always on webinar option. I don't know what people use that for. I guess if they have the webinar room running all the time and they're always presenting. But for now, let's just go schedule for later and hit next. All right. So we've got all these little tabs up here in the top. Each of those has their own specific settings. I'm going to go through each one of them. So under the configuration, we have basic settings. The very first option is your webinar name. So this is, as it says, it's a private title for your reference only. What I use this for, because I do webinars all the time, I put the date here. So for my own reference. So let's say we want to run a webinar on October 30th. And we're going to call it the 90-day the 90-day blueprint to financial freedom. So this next option is the actual title that people are going to see when they sign up. So I'm actually going to take this title because that's the name of my webinar. I'm going to put it down here. And then your webinar description, whatever you want to write here. I'm going to write this webinar. I'll show you how in this webinar, I'll show you how to become financially free in 90 days. Perfect. And then the webinar language, it will actually translate the interface for people that are watching. So if you're obviously in Brazil, you want to select Brazilian or whatever your language is. I assume if you're watching this, you want it in English and just leave that default. And then over here on the right, you can actually put a thumbnail. So this is useful if you're going to share your webinar link in like a group chat or something like that, or somewhere, in a Facebook post or something. So I sometimes will make one in Canva really quick, and you can upload that here. I'm not going to do that in this video, but go ahead and hit save. Now, webinar presenters, I'm going to open this up. So for most people, obviously, you're going to have just one presenter, probably you. With WebinarJam, I think you can have up to 4 presenters, but for most people, just one. So put your name in here and your email address, and then you can upload an image, preferably a picture of your face, because people will see this when they register. So go ahead and put that there. Hit the save button here, and then the save button in the top right. I'm going to hit cancel for now. All right, and then the third option under these settings is the streaming service. You're going to probably leave this one default, but I'll show it to you anyway. So the default option is the WebinarJam Live. So this is going to be, if most presentations, you're going to be sending people to a WebinarJam room, which the advantage of it is that you have full control over the webinar experience. You have all these fancy tools that WebinarJam provides. It's great. In some cases, you might use YouTube Live or Facebook Live. The downside of that is you have a little less control. Even if you do an unlisted YouTube, you still have a little less control over like what kinds of product you're promoting, the call to action. So for most people, just hit WebinarJam Live and then hit save, and then go ahead and hit next. It's giving me an error here. So you're going to want to set up your DKIM. It does give you a full guide on how to do that. Mine's already set up, so I'm not going to go through that. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's got a full guide. I'm not going to go through it because every email address host or every domain host is going to be a little bit different, so it's a little bit nuanced. But for now, I'm just going to hit OK and then save. All right, now we're into the webinar schedule. So you have 3 options here. So I'm running webinars pretty much every single week. When I do these, I always set up one single session. So if you're running the same presentation, let's say you do it every week, like I do, you could choose to do a recurring series. The disadvantage of this is that if you want to tweak settings, you want to change some stuff around, it makes things a little more complicated. Another downside is that when people go to register and you have a series of events, they'll be presented with the option of signing up to all the upcoming webinars, and you don't want to give them too many options. So for me personally, I just go with one single session. It keeps things very simple. It doesn't overwhelm them with options. Now you might want to select multiple sessions. Let's say you're running a webinar next Wednesday at 8 o'clock. You may want to do one on Thursday and Friday at different times so that people have an option. If, you know, maybe their work gets in the way of the 8 o'clock one, you can run one at noon and one at 2 o'clock, for example. So that's a good thing to choose if you want to give people more options. But I like to keep things very simple, not overwhelm people with tons of options. I do one single session, and then the next time I do a webinar, I will just set up everything from scratch with one single session. All right, so in this case, one single session. Then I'm going to go down here and select the date. Let's say it's October 30th at, let's say 6 p.m. And then whatever time zone is relevant, and then hit add. There you go. And then time zone conversion, just leave that on so it automatically adjusts to the registrant's time zone, and then hit save here. Now registration. All right, so the very first option under this is to use the WebinarJam's page builder. So if you don't have like a landing page builder, this could be useful. I never use their default landing page builder because I find it's really clunky and just very limited. I'll just show you really quick. So if you hit customize, and let's say we just choose the default here, registration bar, launch builder. Let it load. Okay, so let's just say, yeah, so this is what it looks like by default. But let's say you want to move stuff around. You don't have the ability to do that. You don't have the ability to drag elements or really customize anything. It's pretty limited in its customization. So I recommend you use you don't use the default builder. You use something like Card or ClickFunnels or something else. So that way you have more control over how the landing page looks. But if you don't have one of those, you're kind of just doing this on a budget or trying to keep this as simple as possible, you can use their default builder. So for now, I will just hit cancel and exit. Now, one of the nice things about their default builder is it allows you to easily split test stuff. So you could choose this one as your version A, hit this box. So it gives you an A and a B. So let's say you want to say 50% of the people to your B option. Click this little slider. Now you can select whatever the B option is. So let's just say we're going to use this one. Hit customize, launch builder. And then you can individually tweak all these and write new descriptions. So by default, it fills in your webinar title. You're going to want to go in and fill out these bullet points by clicking the pencil and doing that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to hit save or cancel and exit. And I'm going to turn off split testing for now. And hit save. All right, the registration form fields. So when I do webinars, I typically just capture their last name and their email address. If you want, you can capture their phone number and you can send them text. You'll have to integrate some kind of texting software into this. I'm not going to show you exactly how to do that because there's a lot of different ways that you could do it and it can get pretty complicated. So for now, I'm going to remove this. So first name, last name, and email address so that we can contact those people. Hit save. Auto subscribe to future webinars. So by default, this is turned off. So what that does is gives them a little checkbox to subscribe to your future webinars. I haven't found this particularly useful because I'm doing the same presentation over and over and over again with a lot of the companies that I work with, or very similar presentations. So when people sign up to one webinar, they're not necessarily going to be interested in all the other ones, and it's kind of annoying for them. They're going to have to unsubscribe. But if you want that option, you can turn it on. I'm going to leave it off, hit save. Free versus paid. By default, it's free to register. With the webinars that I run, I want them to be free because I want lots of people to sign up so that I can sell them some other product at the end of the webinar. But in some cases, you might want to charge a registration fee. So you could do that here. Let's say you want to do $10. And the checkout page, all your options are here. I'm not going to dig deep into this, but for some niche use cases, you might want to charge a registration fee. Let's just leave it free for now. And then new registration notification. This is so that when somebody signs up, you get an email to your personal email. So I prefer to turn this on, and then I'll just enter my email in here. So send notification. That way I just, I can manually look in the registrants, but I also get an email notification, which is nice. So go ahead and enter your email here and then hit save. I'm just going to turn it off for now, but that's how you do it. And then password protection, I always leave this off, no password needed. But if you want to make something that's super exclusive, you want to limit the number of people that are able to get in, for example, you could create a password. Some people choose that. I don't. So for now, I'll just hit save. And then let's go to next. All right, notifications. So it's going to ask you about your email gateway here. One of the great things about WebinarJam is they have a built-in email notification system. By default, I just use the default WebinarJam version, but you could attach ConvertKit, for example, or MailChimp, or whatever email sender you're doing. It's each broadcasting software is a little bit different on how you set it up. They have really good guides on how to do this. I'm not going to go deep into that. For now, for most people, just use the default mail because it works really nicely. Hit save, and then the reminder notifications, which is the next option, is where you'll actually write out the emails that people get. So let's hit the pencil here. By default, they immediately get an email when they sign up, which is great. I recommend you leave that on. You can go in here to the pencil icon and edit it. And what I usually do immediately is delete this line entirely because mine never have a password. So it says, congratulations, you've successfully registered. The best thing you can do now is bookmark the webinar link and to set a reminder in your calendar so you do not miss the webinar. So you can go ahead and type whatever you want into this. You've got these little these variables that will fill in automatically. So it'll fill in the title of your webinar and the presenter and the date and the time, which is great. Or you can just delete all this if you don't want it and just have the text. And then every person that registers will get a unique link. So that's what the live link variable is. So for now, I'm just going to cancel. I'll just leave that as the default. And then what I like to do personally is I like to set up a ton of pre-webinar reminders. So you can hit add email over here. So for example, I'll usually have one email go out per day in the 7 days that run up to the webinar. So here's one. The default one says 24 hours. You can set it to 48, 72, etc. And then just change the subject line, something interesting so people that, people want to open the email, and then obviously change the contents of the email. I would also delete this if you do not have a password. For now, I'm going to hit cancel. I recommend you set up several of these pre-webinar reminders. It'll increase your show up rate, which is great. And then you've got last minute notifications, just an email that goes out right before the webinar. This one by default is 15 minutes before. I always leave this one on, but I'll change the text typically. And so I'll come in here again, delete the password option. and then I'll change this. I'll usually sort of reiterate what the promise of the webinar is, whatever the transformation is. So in my case, it's 90 days to financial freedom. So I'll sort of reiterate that, maybe mention a previous case study that I have, and then I'll mention that here so people get that reminder. So go ahead and hit save on whatever you create. And then you have post-webinar notifications. So I will also set up this as well. I usually set up maybe one per day for like 3 to 5 days afterward. This is really useful, especially if you're selling a product in your webinar. This is useful to remind them, hey, I did this webinar. Here's the replay link. So you can hit add email. And it's great because it gives you the option to send it to everybody that registered, or you can set it to only those who did not attend, for example. So 100 people registered, only 30 attended. You could send this email to the 70 that didn't attend. And then you could go in here, again, delete this password because it's not relevant, but it also gives you this option to send them the replay link, which is great. And sometimes you'll get some extra sales from that. Super useful. If you have some kind of limited time offer, this is where you'd make that. So for now, I'm just going to hit save. And again, I would usually set up a series of these for several days after the webinar. So go ahead and customize that to your needs and then hit save. And then next. Okay. So now we're in the integrations. So again, on the notifications tab, we had the option to integrate into ConvertKit or MailChimp or something like that. In this section, this is where you'd integrate ConvertKit or MailChimp again, but this is if you want to actually capture them and put them into your main email list. So if we configure this, you can select whatever your broadcasting software is. In my case, it's ConvertKit. I don't use this super often, but if you want to get them onto your main email list, this is where you do that. And I'm not going to show you because there's over a dozen different options to choose from. I'm not going to go through each one, but they've got good guides on how to set this up. So if you want to integrate these people into your main email list, this is where you do that. And then third-party tracking systems. This is if you're running Facebook ads to your webinar, which is what I do, but I'm personally using a completely separate website builder, as I already said. But if you're going to use the default page, the default WebinarJam builder, you want to embed a third-party token here on this section. So you'd hit embed a third-party token, and then the most relevant would be to paste your Facebook pixel into the registration page here. So into the page and then into the thank you page afterward. You also have the option to do it in the tracking form itself. Some people might find that useful, but for most people, you're going to put your pixel here in the page and the thank you page. And you can also do it in your live room and your replay tracking page. That's probably not going to be relevant to most people watching this. But go ahead and paste your pixel in there and then go to the next page, next settings. So this is where we customize our thank you page. Again, I don't use WebinarJam's default page builder because it's just very limited, but this is where you do that. So the default confirmation page, we'll be able to customize that down here. But if you use your own custom page, you want to, yourdomain.com/thank you. This little option, send register information and webinar information. This is if you have a pixel set up on your main registration page. If you leave this ticked, it'll send the information to your thank you page. Now that can sometimes cause problems with Facebook. So you want to experiment with this if you're doing some kind of lead conversion campaign. Sometimes having this option ticked will cause problems with Facebook. So you want to test this on your own. For me, I usually tick this off because I'm doing the pixel on my own custom page, but play around with it and see if it works. Sometimes you'll get a warning message from Facebook that you're passing too much personal information off to the thank you page, and they don't want you doing that. So you'll have to play around with that yourself and see what works. But for a lot of people, just use the default confirmation page and hit save. Survey your registrants. I never use this, but it's great to have the option. You can send a survey to people. You can customize what the questions are and do that here, enter the question and the various polling options. That could be useful for some people. I never use it. So for now, I'm just going to hit cancel. And then the thank you page design. It uses a page builder like on the registration page. Let's hit customize and see what it looks like. Okay. So yeah, by default, it shows your title and the name of the host and the date. So again, by default, this is useful. Not a lot of, you can't click and drag or really customize what this page looks like other than the text, but for some people, that's good enough. Let's hit save for now and hit next. All right, so these are the options for the actual live interface itself. A lot of these I'll just leave as default. So the agenda, I never use this, but if you want to, you could, if you, let's say you got a 90-minute presentation, you could just present a little agenda in advance so people know what they're doing or what the presentation is going to be about. Autoplay, disabled. I will always turn this on. That way, if somebody joins the webinar, it's already playing. It'll mute it by default, but at least they don't have to click one more time to actually play it. So go ahead and enable that and hit save. Countdown page design. Again, this is using the WebinarJam builder. You can go in here and customize this. I usually leave that as default, but I will go in and make sure that this default text is changed by hitting this little pencil and writing a little description here. So that's where you do that. For now, I'm going to save and exit and hit save. And then the live room design. This is what people see when you're actually presenting it. You can go through here and choose just some color variations. It's pretty much the same across the board, but you can, if you've got specific brand colors you're trying to go for, you can customize that here. I usually leave it on the default. Hit save. Polls and quizzes, again, another feature I never use, but if you want to poll people live, it gives a way to engage with people while you're presenting your information. You can add that here. I'm not going to do that. Product offers, this is useful. This I always use. So product offers, let's add a new offer. So if you're selling, let's say you sell some kind of one-on-one coaching, one-on-one personal coaching. So this is for your reference, and then the headline, in this case, could probably be the same thing. Upload an image, whatever the product is, and then you can customize the text above the button, on the button, and then you want to send it to whatever your product link is. That's where you do that here. And then you have all these other options. You can broadcast sales in real time. So if you set up some kind of tracking with WebinarJam, you can actually record when people actually buy it, which is good for creating urgency because people, while they're on your live presentation, they can see other people buying the product. So this is where you turn that on. Apply scarcity. So if your product, let's say you're running a limited time, only 5 people can sign up for this coaching, this is where you do that. And you could just say 5 units or 10 or whatever. And then you can apply additional urgency by creating a timer. So this offer is only available for 3 hours, for example. And that's where you can do that. Very useful for creating scarcity, creating urgency. So that's where you set that up. All right, video injections, file handouts, and slide presentations. I don't really use these options, but I'll go through them very quickly. If you have a video injection would be if you're, let's say you're presenting live and you get distracted by somebody comes into the room and you have to just go really quickly. You could set up a video injection so that a video plays. You could also, if you've got the same webinar running all the time, maybe there's a segment in the live presentation that you just play a video, maybe some kind of ad or something pre-recorded. You can set that up here. And then file handouts, let's say you're doing like a ebook or something. A lot of people do that. You can add the file here, and then you can hand that out while the presentation is live. And then slide presentations, I've used this in the past, but you can also set it up in the live room itself, minutes before you actually go live if you have to. But if you've got like Google Slides or something you're presenting on screen, which is very good for a webinar, I recommend you do something like that. So they're not just staring at you. You've got like a presentation. This is where you add that presentation. PowerPoint or Google Slides, you can add that here. And that is all those options. Hit next. Webinar replay recording. I definitely recommend you turn this on. Yes, allow people to access the replay page. A lot of people, you might get 100 registrants. You're never going to get 100% show up rate of the people that register. So it's good to have the option for them to go and see the replay. And so this allows them to do that here. Let's go ahead and hit save. It records it. And the other benefit too is if you record the replay, you can download it and re-upload it to a different social media platform like YouTube or Rumble. So once you hit enable, all these other options will appear. So let's click webinar replay contents. So most people are just going to want to leave this on by default. So it's an exact copy of what you presented live, including the chats. I think that's very useful. So if they watch the replay, they can actually see the questions popping up in the chat so that they have some kind of reference. When you're answering questions, they can see the questions too. There's also an option to do a custom video. I've never used this, but I guess some people use it. You can maybe do a previously recorded webinar and put that here. And then you can redirect to an external URL, something I've never used either. By default, I just use replica replay. So go ahead and select that and hit save. And then replay controls, you can allow user to use the player controls. Yeah, this is useful. I always turn this on. So that way, you know, they can pause it or adjust volume and stuff like that. So turn that on, hit save. And then you've got a replay expiration date. This is useful if you're presenting something and you want to create another layer of urgency or scarcity. You could say this, you know, the presentation was exclusive live, but now you can access the replay for only 3 days. So you can set an expiration date and say, you know, 72 hours or whatever. And that way there's some urgency to go watch the replay if they missed the live event. So go ahead and set that up, hit save, and then allow users to submit questions. I've never used this option, but it's really nice to have. What you can do is activate a question box, and then I believe it gets sent to your email. So if somebody watches the replay, they ask some specific question, it gets sent to your email. That gives you a way to interact with those people and follow them up. So that's very useful to have. I don't personally use it, but if you want to set it up, go ahead. And then hit next, and we're done. That's how you set up your webinar. So there's one last thing I want to do. So we're going to go to the dashboard. So here it is. Here's the webinar we just set up. Now, you're going to want to go to your links because you obviously want the links to be able to present this. So when you advertise your page, here's the registration link. So this is the link you'll give out to people. Now, if you want to embed this in your own custom landing page, which is what I do, you'll go to this tab, embed into your website. And I usually just use the registration bar, but you can choose any of these options. Change the text on the button. So join, or how about reserve, your seat, for example. That's the button on the text. And then you can customize how it looks, the colors and stuff like that. And then you'll take this code, this script, and then embed it into your custom landing page, which is what I do. I use ClickFunnels personally because I just like being able to fully customize the page, and then I can A/B test it from there. It's a little bit better than the default WebinarJam. All right, and then you also have this link here, direct link to Liveroom. I don't use this very often, but sometimes if there's like last minute people that want to join, you want to bypass the typical registration process, you can send them this special link and it gives them a straight entry point right into your webinar, and that's where you get this link. And then after you run your webinar, you can go to this replay section right here, and you'll have an option to download the replay video as well. Under the presenters tab, let's say you had multiple presenters, like you had, I don't know, 3 or 4 other people. This is where you give them their special link to present from. So you would send them, right before you go live, you would send them their own special live room link. So that's where you get that. If it's just you that's going live, then this is where you find that live room link. But other than that, that's how you fully set up WebinarJam in 2024. I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions at all, ask them below. If you're a business, you offer coaching, or you have some kind of high-ticket course, and you want me to come in, set up some webinars for you, set up the Facebook ads, set up the landing pages, set up all the settings for you, and make it into a very profitable webinar where you get a high return on investment, sometimes as high as 7x, which is what I've done in the past with other companies, book a call below, and I will see if we're a good fit. You can see if we're a good fit, and we can go from there. Thanks for watching.